Good morning to everyone who's just joined us in the waiting room. We're just waiting for everybody to join today's event, and then we'll get started. We'll only be a few minutes, but thank you very much for joining us this morning. Good morning to everybody who's just joining us. We're just waiting for everybody to get on the call, and then we'll make a start.
Thank you.
Right, welcome to everybody who's just joining us. We've still got people signing in, so we'll just wait one more minute and then we'll make a start. But thank you very much for joining this morning. Right, people are still signing in. Right, it's 1 minute past 10, so I think we'll make a start. I think most people, oh no, people are still joining. Just give us a few more seconds. Right, I think we'll get going. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Electricity Northwest Zero Carbon Communities event, which we are hosting in partnership with the Northwest Local Energy Hub. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. My name's Helen Seagrave, and I'm the Community Energy Manager at Electricity Northwest. I'll be introducing us and talking a bit more about our role in supporting communities later in the agenda. My co-host for today is Kate from the Northwest Energy Hub, and Kate manages the Northwest Rural Community Energy Fund, and Kate's also speaking later on the agenda. We're going to manage the questions and answers and introducing the speakers together this morning. And just to let you know that we're recording this session, so if you ask any questions in person, we'll assume that you're happy to be on the recording. So as you can see, we have a packed agenda this morning with some excellent speakers. Hopefully we've built in plenty of time for your questions, and if you would like to, there's an opportunity to stay on after the event for networking in smaller groups. The aim of this event is to provide ideas, inspiration and practical advice on how to identify, start to deliver community level projects that help towards reducing carbon emissions and moving us towards net zero. And just before we get started, just like to cover a bit of housekeeping, and we've got a short poll to get us all going. So for the housekeeping, it will help the sort of the bandwidth and stuff if you can stay on mute and turn your camera off unless you're talking. There'll be an opportunity to turn cameras on and talk during the network in session. The speakers will use their videos when presenting, and questions can be read at any time through the Q&A function, and we can take questions that way, or there is a raise your hand function if you want to speak during the Q&A sessions. So just before I introduce the first speaker and we get started, my colleague, I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Hillary, who's going to talk us through how to do a quick poll. We just want to ask a couple of questions about where you're from and where you are in your net zero journey. So Hillary, are you okay just to go through the instructions?
Yeah, if you could keep an eye on the waiting room, Helen, that would be great.
Of course I can.
Okay, so hi everyone. We've got a quick poll for you to do about where you are on your journey and where you're coming from today. So in the chat is a link to something called Mentimeter, and there's 2 questions there. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to the Mentimeter website on your web browser. If people are just joining, they won't be able to see the chat from before they join, so I might just keep reposting it. And you click on that link. If you're on an iPad or something, it might take you off your Zoom screen onto your web browser and you can complete the poll. And in a moment, I'll screen share the results of that. So anyone who's just joined, there's a link in the chat to a poll. If you click on that link, it should open up in your web browser and you should be able to just answer the couple of questions that are there. Okay. Any problems? Shout and I'll see what I can do to help. Just going to keep. Okay, so anyone just joining, there's a link in the chat box to a poll, and I'm going to put the results up on a screen share now. Okay, so wow, done very well. So 60 people have already answered. So hopefully you can see those results coming in now.
Okay, so lots of people from community groups, local government groups, parish councils. Excellent.
Anyone who's just joined, if you want to still do this poll, I've just posted it again in the chat. So if you click that link, you can complete this poll. It's just nice for us to know, yeah, what kind of organisation you're from. So that's the first question. I should be able to click through to the next one. And this is, where are you or your community on your net zero journey? And
lots of different experiences there. So hopefully you'll all get something out of the event today. But thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And please carry on voting if you just joined us. It'd be useful to know where you're from and where you are. So if we go back over to my screen, Hilary, if that's okay.
Yeah, you just need to click share screen. I've stopped.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me a second then. Share screen. And now, yeah, it's my great pleasure to introduce Jodie from, have I shared my screen yet?
Not yet.
Okay, thank you very much. There we go. Can you see that now?
No, just press share or the button right at the bottom right. Is that working?
Very sorry about this, everybody.
I can share them if you want, Helen. It's no problem.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
This is Jodie's.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, what I was trying to say is my great pleasure to introduce Jodie Giles from Regen, who's got lots of experience with working with community and local energy groups, and she's going to talk to us today about why we should all be talking about net zero and what actions communities should be taking. So I'll hand over to you, Jodie, and hopefully the slides will appear as if by magic so you can start your presentation. Thank you very much.
They have. Thanks, Helen, and thank you to you for organising today and inviting me to come and speak. It's really nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces on this call as well. So welcome everybody. As Helen said, my name's Jodie. I've been leading our community and local energy programme at Regen for about 8 years, and I also sit on the board of a local community energy organisation, South Dartmoor Community Energy. Helen's asked me to talk to you about why net zero and why I think communities should take action. So I'm going to talk you through a few of the reasons today, but I know that Helen's got a load of really amazing speakers lined up for you who are going to give you a lot more detail on some of these topics. So if we can go to the next slide.
Hilary.
Thanks,
Thank
Helen.
you.
So you might be wondering who Regen are. We're a national organisation. We are a mission-led, not-for-profit membership organisation, and we're working to transform our energy system to make it more democratic, decentralised and decarbonised. And my bit of that work sits firmly in the kind of democratic box of how you make sure that this transition in our energy system is a fair one and one that doesn't leave people behind, and that fairly involves and benefits people at a local level. And to do that, we've been supporting community energy for many, many years. We host a network, we facilitate events. I was delivering a similar event to this yesterday for Northern Power Grid, Western Power Distribution, and then I've got more coming up in the next few weeks and months with Northern Power Grid. And we write a lot of guides and deliver a lot of resources to try and help this part of the energy sector become more involved, more engaged, more upskilled. Next slide, please, Helen. So why net zero? I think I don't want to dwell too much on the kind of doom and gloom elements of climate change, because I think there's a lot of narrative out there about what a disaster it's going to be. And I wanted to kind of share this poem with you. It's written by a poet in residence that we had at Regen a few years ago. We have an arts programme because we believe that culture and bringing a light-hearted note to this is one way of engaging people in a difficult topic. The title of this poem is "A partially submerged man in Somerset thinks about investing in local renewable energy projects to mitigate the damaging effects of climate change." And this is the poem. It's very short. "I want to go renewable so my streets are less canoeable." We're already feeling the very damaging effects of climate change in our country, and that is deeply affecting our communities. And really, when we're talking about transitioning our energy system, a lot of the focus is on keeping our bills low, but saving a couple of pounds on our bills is going to be less important than making sure that we aren't spending billions and billions of pounds dealing with the damaging effects of climate change. So it's the kind of opportunity cost of not doing anything is more severe than spending a little bit more money up front now to make sure that we are prepared and can mitigate. Next slide, please, Helen. So in terms of the Committee on Climate Change, why net zero? They have done a lot of work trying to articulate this problem. They do believe, they have done a lot of modelling to make sure that they know we have the technology now to enable us to transition to net zero by 2050. Lots of local authorities and community organisations being more ambitious than that, and lots of people across the country trying to work out plans of how to actually get there. But ultimately, this transition is going to require all of us to get involved. This is not something that governments can sort out on their own, and it's not something that communities can sort out on their own. And it's going to require huge amounts of collaboration and changes to every part of how we live. And that includes things like transportation, how and when we use our energy, our homes, the fabric of our homes, how we eat. And yeah, if you look at the kind of emissions today, you can see where our kind of main problem areas are. Quite a big one is transport. The blue band is residential and commercial buildings. Industry is a big one, and power is a massive one. So there's lots of information out there about that. I'm not going to dwell on it too much. I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is a slide I've borrowed from the fabulous Community Energy England, and they did a visioning document last year which set out what they want this sector, where they want this sector to go, and what they want to achieve. And I think this picture really nicely articulates the benefits of communities and why we should take action on climate change. It's democratic, it's about control, it's about job creation, and you'll hear the green recovery mentioned a lot, and COVID recovery, and all of that fits together in terms of our how we address climate change. We can do a lot about community transport. Some of those answers aren't always the most sexy. We might not all be driving around in Teslas, but lots of communities are doing some really interesting collaborative transport projects where they're having community bus services. There's one near us called Bob the Bus, and they drive around the local town, and they're really, really successful project. And that is reducing, that's making a big impact on climate change. It's about communities being empowered to lead themselves. Communities are very good at finding their own solutions. It's about livable homes, so comfort and addressing poverty, actually, because a lot of poverty in this country is caused by very poor housing stock and people living in damp, mouldy, cold homes. It's about affordability on our bills. It's about security of supply. If we're generating energy locally, it's much more secure than importing it from volatile countries across the globe. And the just transition, I'm going to talk about a bit more about that probably on the next slide. Job creation and local value. This slide is about showing you a comparison between a community-owned project and a very good best practice developer who've developed a wind farm, and this example happens to be from Wales. This is about showing you the difference in monetary terms and in job creation. And when I talk about benefits from community and local energy, these are the two things that I talk about most at a kind of political level, that job creation and that financial value going back into local communities. Really important to mention here that that's unconstrained income. So this is from the good old days when we had a feed-in tariff and we had a business model that would underpin communities to build their own generation projects. This one happens to be 2 wind turbines in Wales with a £638,000 community benefit fund per megawatt. And the commercial project is 228 megawatts, 76 turbines. It's massive. They've done really, really extensive community engagement, but their community benefit fund is much smaller, 150,000. So it shows you the difference between a commercial entity doing these types of projects for profit as their primary motivation versus a community project, which does have to make a profit to enable it to be viable, but it's putting a lot more money back into local projects. And the job creation is another difference here. There's a lot more local jobs created by the local project than the commercial project. Let's go on to the next slide and we'll talk a bit about energy justice. So there's a lot of discussion at a political level about making sure that this transition is democratic, it's a just transition and people are not left behind. But when it actually comes down to the nuts and bolts of what that means, no one's very clear, apart from the communities who have been out there across the country, charities and communities, delivering this work. And what I'm talking about here is kind of free, impartial energy advice and support and retrofit work. So I know we've got Carbon Co-op talking later, and Britt's going to talk a bit about the work, some of the incredible work the Carbon Co-op have been doing. This is a photo of the group that I sit on the board of in South Devon, you know, an area that is typically quite affluent, but we still have pockets of deep deprivation and people really struggling. And we've used our community benefit funds to give emergency relief grants during COVID. So helping people pay for and stay on metered supply, to keep their electricity on. Other examples here are Communities for Renewables have been doing some incredible work. They are an organisation that Regen helped set up to help communities develop large-scale solar farms. And they, in the first months of COVID, diverted all of their community benefit funds straight into fuel banks and debt relief, so that people out there in communities struggling because of the effects of COVID could be supported in a way that governments just can't, they can't get to that level of support for people who aren't going to open the door to an energy supplier because they don't have that trust there. And communities have an important role to play here because you live where you live, people know who you are. Community organisations are very good at building a local brand and a local trusted brand, and local authorities are really good at this as well, actually, in terms of delivering those tangible services that help people who are really struggling. The stats on the right here are some stats from 2017 from all of the community energy groups in Devon. They supported over 2,000, like nearly 3,000 households, and saved them a huge amount of money on their energy bills. But they're also doing simple draft proofing. You know, again, this is sort of non-sexy stuff, really. It's like fitting LED light bulbs and draft proofing and helping people figure out how they're going to deal with damp and mold in their homes, and helping people figure out how they're going to get better insulation and upgrade their white goods to energy efficient white goods. Okay, let's move on from the healthier homes. I want to tell you a little story now about this group that I've been working with in Devon for 8 years. I started working with this network when I joined Regen, and at that point we had about 17 local energy groups in Devon. We're now up to about 23, and when I started working with this group, they all wanted to do something tangible about climate change in their own communities. And for them, that meant going to do small scale projects that were about making a statement about, we're trying to do something about climate change here. And that involved things like putting solar panels on village halls, solar panels on local supermarkets, solar panels on educational institutions, like local CFE colleges, working with local authorities on council buildings. And they all wanted to do their own local projects in their own villages and their own towns. And at that point, I remember going to them and saying, with Jake Bernier from Communities for Renewables, who had worked out a financial model based on the value that they would create and the carbon that they would reduce if they all clubbed together. And we showed them this model. And the value that they could create by collaborating was much, much greater than doing lots of mini projects on their own. And the carbon reduction, which is the impact that most of them said they wanted to achieve, was also much bigger if they clubbed together and did projects at scale. And at that point, they said to us, no, we don't want to do that. We can see it's going to make us more money, and we can see it's going to deliver more valuable carbon savings. And we want to achieve those things, but no, thanks. We're going to go and carry on and do our little projects. And they did that, and they went through the process of feeling the pain of the end of the subsidies for the feed-in tariff and the removal essentially of that subsidy that underpinned the business model for community energy. And then a few years ago, we met. We have a spring gathering every year where we meet up and we spend a couple of days together eating and drinking and sort of counselling each other about how difficult it is to do community energy. And they said, you know what, I think we need to do these projects really big now. And they'd finally kind of come around to the idea of working in isolation and doing small scale projects is important from a symbolic perspective. But because climate change is such an urgent threat, and we are going to have to do things so fast and at such scale if we want to achieve the carbon reduction that we want to see and deliver the benefit to our local communities, we're going to have to collaborate. So they set up Devon Energy CIC. This organisation since then has reviewed a pipeline of 100 megawatts of solar farms. Some of them are built, some of them are in planning, some of them had planning and never got built. They are narrowing that down to the ones where we can get a network connection, because in the southwest we're very constrained. And we've also got a project where we're looking at we're in the early feasibility stages of looking at a 70 megawatt wind farm that would be 100% community owned. And we're doing all of that because, again, the speed and scale at which we need to decarbonise is only going to be possible if we really think big about this. So that group, really amazing projects in there. They've done some really incredible work in isolation, but they really have come around to this idea that to really deliver on this, we have to be smarter. The other thing that this group are doing is a lot of work with Devon County Council on public body PPAs. That's a power purchase agreement. So with the end of the feed-in tariff, there is no viable business model for delivering projects unless you scale. So if you look at what's happening in the commercial sector, you'll see solar farms down here of 50 to 100 megawatts, massive projects. And it's only at that economy of scale that you can create a return. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of work with the local authority trying to develop this agreement to buy our power, because that means if we can get a long-term agreement where they will buy our power, it creates a secure revenue stream that gives us the certainty that means that we can go and build new projects. And so that's another example of that kind of collaboration being absolutely essential. And there's a link to that group on that page, so you can go and check that out if you want to. Okay, Helen. So I've got a few top tips for you from the front line. This is from the kind of experience that I've had over the last 8 years of working with groups all over the country trying to deliver these projects. If you want to deliver those tangible carbon savings and real financial benefit in your communities, you have to be really ambitious. You have to think really big. That speed and scale thing, again, absolutely essential. Use data to deliver the most impactful actions. So I see a lot of communities focusing on on things that aren't going to deliver as impactful actions as they might want to achieve. So use the data. Bays have just funded a really nice impact tool developed by the Centre for Sustainable Energy, where you can type in your village's or town's postcode and see where your key emissions are coming from. Engagement is absolutely fundamental. So that bringing people with you elements, you know, we will not be able to do projects like this unless people are benefiting and brought along with us on this journey. It's very easy to get very excited as an engineer or an energy geek about, you know, this is absolutely the right thing to do. Everyone should just automatically know that this is the right thing to do and come with us. But that isn't the case. You know, you do have to put a lot of work into engaging people. You have to think about that from a kind of cultural and artistic perspective. Think about how, you know, how do you look like you're having more fun than everyone else so everyone wants to join you? And there's other things that you can do if you don't want to do a massive energy generation project. There's lots of direct, tangible things you can do about energy efficiency and fuel poverty in your community. And there's some very, very good examples of projects already delivering work like that nationally. So have fun. If you don't want to do those big projects, keep it simple and focus on the real, tangible, direct things that you can do now. And then lastly, think about your impact. So Helen, if you could just click to the next slide. I know that many of you on this call are maybe a bit more new to community energy. Some of you will have been doing it for a very long time and be very familiar with the State of the Sector survey. This is a survey that Community Energy England and Wales do every year. This year we're joined by Community Energy Scotland and Regen are helping and supporting in delivery of that project. And this is about proving the impact of what community energy delivers, because it's only by proving that additional social and environmental value that we are going to get policymakers and regulators in government to change the narrative and support this area more. So Helen, if you can click to the next slide, that link will pop up. Even if you're new to this and you're a new group starting out, we'd really like to hear about what your ambitions are and what your plans are and how far you've got with those. So please, please, please fill that in. There's a few more weeks to fill it in and the links are there. And I'm sure Helen will be sending the slides after this. So next slide. So thank you ever so much for listening. I hope that you found this useful, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but I'm going to defer to Helen on timekeeping because I'm
We've got time for question and answers at the end of this session when all of the speakers have had a chance to go. We've hopefully got enough time to take as many as that come through. So yes, thank you very much for that. I'm going to try and share my screen again, if that's okay. Can people see that? Can somebody?
Not
right.
yet. I think you just need to click through and click share.
I'm going to. I don't know why it's not working because I got it to work earlier. Right, I see where the share thing is. Thank you very much. There we go. Is that working now?
Yeah, if you just make it full screen, that's brilliant.
There we go. Right, thank you, Jodie. That was great to hear about all the projects that have been going on down in Devon. And now I'd like to introduce Ro Baker and Molly Hogg, who work with groups in Cumbria as part of Cumbria Action for Sustainability. Over to you guys.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks, Jodie. I'm Ro Baker. I'm going to follow up on some of the things that Jodie talked about around engagement, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Molly, who's going to give a more detailed case study of the work that she's doing with Ambleside. So just to let you know a little bit about Cumbria Action for Sustainability, we've been operating now for 20 years as Cumbria's climate change and sustainability organisation. We have a rapidly growing staff of 22 and we're recruiting, and we have over 4,000 supporters. So if you're Cumbria based and you haven't got in touch with us yet, please do. We're here to help you. Next slide, please, Helen. Thank you. So I thought it'd be useful just to talk about where to start if you're a newly formed community group and you'd like to do something around zero carbon or community energy. Every community has its own starting point and catalyst. For some, it may be very specifically around community renewable energy. But for others, as Jodie so rightly said, for many, it's around tackling fuel poverty or domestic energy retrofit. For others, the trigger in your community may be around transport or a lack of transport. And for others, it may be simply about local food supplies. The key is to find the driver that your community can unite around. And this will determine your engagement strategy. Because as Jodie said, what you want to do is bring as many people with you as possible. And the way to do that is to find the key driver in your community. And that will be different for every community. Research what's already been done and look at for any initiatives that are already underway. Never assume that you're the first group or first individual that thinks, oh, I really must do something about climate change or zero carbon. Actually, there'll be lots of people who've done things, and there'll be lots of research and reports having been done in your community. And you need to not reinvent the wheel, try to look at what's been done before, and wherever possible, join forces with other like-minded groups. Always check what's happening in your wider area strategy. It's really important to think about, have you got a community plan in place? Have you got a neighbourhood plan in place? What's your district local plan? Because if you've got all of these green initiatives, green ideas, zero carbon actions already embedded within your local plans, then this is a great way in which to evidence the need. They've already been consulted on within your community, and they're great evidence for if you want to go forward and write funding bids. Jodie mentioned the impact. Sorry, Helen, can you just go back?
Of course I can.
Sorry, Jodie mentioned the impact report from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. It's a really useful toolkit there, the Parish Carbon Footprint Toolkit. Do check that. I'm going to post the link to that in the chat later. And that's a great place to start. If you're operating in Cumbria and you'd like to have more support from CAFS ourselves, we have the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership Project. We've got a growing staff. We'll have more capacity to support you. We're due to recruit a sustainability network coordinator, and it will be accompanied by a 100k community grant fund. And this will help small community groups working on the ground in Cumbria really activate their initiatives. Next slide, please, Helen. Don't be afraid to pursue low-hanging fruit. That's the title of this slide. It's great to look for popular initiatives that will give you easy wins. There's absolutely no shame in doing that whatsoever. You may have ambitious goals for installing renewable energy schemes, and you may have an idea about mass community domestic retrofitting, and these are fantastic aims to have, but you do need to bring the community with you first. And so it's well worth considering really small initiatives like repair cafes, like community growing, like looking at the viability of solar PV on the school roof. All of these things help to build your community profile and encourage people to engage. So it's really useful to choose a multifaceted approach that will bring as many people, maybe people who've only got a couple of hours on a Saturday, to come with you, and they're social events and they will engage with people. And that's the key thing, is how to communicate. Next slide, please, Helen. So communication is key. If your community isn't driven by the wider concerns of climate change as the key driver or trigger, you don't need to use this as your communication vehicle. Tailor your communication to your audience. Every step you take towards engaging people in zero carbon is a positive one. And so if it's around having a cup of tea at a repair cafe because somebody's lamp is broken, that's fine. The next step will be to engage them in a community renewable energy project. And it's simply about finding simple steps to bring people along that journey with you. Don't think that your community or your project stands on its own. It doesn't. It's part of a major global transition, and we're all in it together, and there's a wealth of support out there. Your community doesn't have to tackle everything at once. You're part of a much bigger picture. So climate outreach have some fantastic tools that you can use to look at how you communicate with your community and how you communicate climate change and zero carbon. And I'm going to post the link to their work and their website in the chat. Next slide, please, Helen. So this is the work that I'm currently engaged in, Community Energy Startup. It's funded by Electricity North West, Empowering Our Communities Fund. I'm currently working with 3 communities in Cumbria and Lancashire, Alston Moor, Sustainable Keswick, and Holton with Afton in Lancashire. And we are right at the start of developing community area PV mapping and carbon footprinting for residents and small to medium businesses. And this work is really me rolling out the work that my colleague Molly has been pioneering in Ambleside. It's a great project, so I'm going to hand over to Molly now to tell you a little bit about that.
Thanks very much, Ro. Hello, everybody. I'm really pleased that both Ro and Jodie have spoken before me, because they've really introduced and explained some of these concepts that I'm going to be touching on that relate to Ambleside. So just to set the scene, really, CAFs have been funded by South Lakeland District Council to support Ambleside's whole town approach to zero carbon since around April 2019. And the reason why SLDC want to support Ambleside is because they really want to develop a demonstrator project that can then expand across the district and can be replicated elsewhere. So it's led by Ambleside Action for a Future, which was founded in late 2018. I can see that some members are on the call, so it's great to see them here. And it's really grown. There's over 100 members, 6 very active subgroups. And we've been doing an awful lot of groundwork in the last couple of years and some active projects. But now I feel we're really getting to the stage where things are going to start taking off. Next slide, please. So some principles. Oh, I do apologise. That is the postman. I'm going to ignore it. Sorry, really bad timing. What I've been really impressed with by the group is just their level of ambition, and they really are taking responsibility for this pace and scale that's required. And in order to do that, they've taken a very holistic approach, trying to tackle this problem from all angles. And in doing so, it's very inclusive. They're trying to find something for everyone to engage with and to benefit from. And as Rose mentioned, it's thinking about those co-benefits. It's how to draw people into it. So there's things like, you'll have a more comfortable home, less drafty. The streets will be less congested if we can tackle transport. So this is the list of the groups and the different projects that we're working on. There's a lobbying group, transport, growing, warmer homes, renewable energy, and carbon footprinting. And CAFs has been closely involved in the last 3. So those are the ones I'm going to talk about now. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking at the renewable energy scheme first, we've done a whole lot of work really to think about what's suitable for Ambleside. So there's kind of 3 things you really need to think about here. Is what technology is suitable and what sites would be able to sort of host that technology, and then how you're going to deliver it, how are you going to fund it, how are you going to manage it when it actually happens. So looking at the technology, a little while ago, we commissioned some work from Lancaster University, and they developed a methodology for assessing the rooftop potential for a whole place. So they looked at Ambleside, and that demonstrated that solar PV, there is quite a high potential for generation in Ambleside. So this, along with other bits of work, determined that's the technology we're going to focus on. We've since been working with a developer to turn that into an interactive web map, so you can actually click on a building and it will show you the actual potential for that particular building. So that's a really good engagement tool and a really good tool for finding sites that are suitable for solar PV. That's available, can be developed for other communities if that's something that you're interested in. So in terms of the delivery models, I'm really pleased that Jodie's explained some of this and the challenges of setting up sort of individual community energy companies. They are still possible. Phil Davies is here and he'll tell you it's still possible. In Ambleside, it's not really viable. We decided not to go down that route. So for part of the project, we're going to be working, hopefully, fingers crossed, with the Big Solar Co-op. And we've got Noel here, so she can take any questions about the Big Solar Co-op. And hopefully that will be maybe around 5 sort of medium-sized-ish non-domestic buildings. And then alongside that, we are hoping to run a bulk buying scheme for householders for domestic properties for solar PV. So then looking at the warmer homes, we're looking to try and do a similar thing where we can work with lots of homeowners and make it a lot easier for them to work with installers to get energy efficiency measures done in their homes. That's also been supported by some thermographic surveys that the group is going to be doing with householders to see really kind of where their homes are leaking energy. Next slide, please. So the other big bit of work we've been doing with Ambleside is carbon footprinting. So the reason this was chosen as important is because it really gives people an understanding of the magnitude of their emissions and, more importantly, sort of the relative magnitude from the different sources. So it really helps to prioritise which areas we're going to tackle. So we commissioned a top-down approach initially, and these are the pie charts you can see. So this is looking at the whole of the town, and a lot of it is based on published data. And as both Jodie and Ro have mentioned before, there's now the CSE, the Centre for Sustainable Energy Impact tool, which shows this data for every parish. I think it's just England. I don't think it's the whole UK. I'm not entirely sure. So any other parish can look at that and see this data for their particular town. What we also wanted to do was look at a bottom-up approach, so enable individual householders and businesses to calculate their own specific carbon footprint. So again, they can have their personal action plans on how they're going to tackle this. That carbon footprinting tool is now available and it's on the CAF's website, and I'm going to show you just a slide of that in a second. But the third step in this is obviously it's all well and good knowing where your emissions are coming from, but then you need to know what to do about it. So we have lots of advice on our website, and we're also in this next year going to be looking at running advice sessions for individuals and businesses. Next slide, please. So this is just a screenshot from the calculator on our website. So if you just go onto our homepage, you'll find it there, and it's free to use for anyone in Cumbria or Lancashire. Next slide. Thank you. So just to finish off now with sort of the key challenges that we're facing in Ambleside is that most, if not all, of the projects really involve persuading other people to do something. And that's always a massive, massive challenge. It takes an awful lot of legwork, a lot of engagement, a lot of communication, a lot of finding reasons for people to want to do it. The other big challenge is funding, and for the projects in Ambleside, we need to pay external consultants to help us. I'm funded, so I do a lot of the project management support, and we also need funding for sort of technical feasibility work for the energy projects. And we wanted support for this community engagement, because we really do need the whole community to get on board to make these bulk buying schemes work. So we're going to be paying some people to do some promotions, some engagements, some surveying to really help us make that really effective. And the issues with the funding is that you're not always eligible for all the funds. We've come up against that with one particular fund. There's competition from other projects. You may not necessarily win, even if you are eligible. And then you have a long wait. You don't know whether you're going to get it or not, so you can't really plan because you don't really know whether you're going to get the money. And then some of the funds as well, you discover a great fund, but you'll find the deadline is in 2 weeks' time. You're like, oh, I'm not ready. How am I going to submit an application? So my advice would be to really research the funds that are out there and plan for that. See what you're eligible for, when the deadlines are, so you can start getting your projects organised. I'm not going to go through them, but these are just a list of funds at the bottom here that we've either applied for, we've benefited from, and one that we haven't been actually eligible for. So that's it from me. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. That was another great presentation. So just before I introduce the Carbon Co-op speakers, just to let you know, to remind you to put any questions that you might have in the chat function. We can collate them during the next couple of presentations, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&As at the end of the next 2 presentations. So next, I would very much like to introduce Laura and Britt from Carbon Co-op, who are going to talk about their projects, and particularly the Oldham Energy Futures. So over to you two.
Hi everyone, thanks for that, Helen. So I'm Laura, I work for Carbon Co-op as the project manager for Oldham Energy Futures. If you haven't heard of Carbon Co-op before, we're an energy services and advocacy cooperative that helps people and communities to make radical reductions on carbon emissions in their homes and communities. So we're going to be talking about Oldham Energy Futures today, which is our latest project focused on community engagement that really at its core is about how do we trigger action in neighbourhoods and communities that are yet to think about how to transition to a lower carbon neighbourhood and fundamentally own those actions as well. It's a project that is funded by ECLE, which is a local government sustainability network based in Germany. I'm going to be presenting with my colleague Britt, who we've worked really closely in shaping this project. So over to Britt.
Hello, my name is Britt. I've been working for the Carbon Co-op a bit over 2 years, and I guess in my bag to the Carbon Co-op I brought experience in community-led neighbourhood development. It was mainly in housing, business and green space, and it was as a facilitator, also actually as an artist, so there's always a bit of space for storytellers in this kind of work, and but maybe also most relevantly as a citizen in a low-income neighbourhood. And Laura and I have been building up a team at Carbon Co-op that develops educational and participatory and comms processes in order to create conditions for more citizen participation and leadership in the energy transition. And it's a real pleasure to be on the same panel with Regen and CAF and Community Energy South, who we take so much inspiration from for our work. So we are presenting a project today that is still in development, so early stage development actually, and we will therefore speak a little bit about why we are developing this approach, and then we'll share some of our initial questions and what the format is we develop in response to those questions. So we hope it will help you to start to think through what your approach to community engagement could look like, both at a local authority level or if you are working from within a community. Next slide, please.
So to set the context for what got us thinking about this project initially, was very much in response to the climate emergency motions that were passed across Greater Manchester in response to the incredible amount of citizen campaigning that has happened over the last couple of years. And within those different motions, there's a number of actions talking about how do we bring communities along with us in planning and initiating low carbon action. And so because of Carbon Co-op's background in working with communities, particularly in the home environment and looking at energy efficiency, we started to wonder about that question of how could we apply some of the learning from Carbon Co-op in the home context and think about that at the neighbourhood scale instead. Next slide, please. And so we formed a question that is a combination between that desire for local action and Carbon Co-op's background in decarbonisation work, which is how can local people uncover the potential to improve the power, heat and transport systems that underlie their homes, public spaces and local area, and imagine how those changes can benefit their community. And then there's a number of different kind of aspects that we've broken that down to, which we'll share as we go through the presentation to kind of show some of the thinking of how we've responded to that big overarching question. Next slide, please. The answer that we came up with so far, and we're going to be testing this really soon, was Oldham Energy Futures, which is essentially around bringing together two new local energy groups in two quite different neighbourhoods in Oldham, so Shoulder and Westward, one up towards the hills in the Peak District, and then one right in the centre of Oldham. And to take those groups of people who haven't taken action on climate before, bring them together to start to think about what's happening in their local area, what could they do to shape plans for change, and then test and own those changes themselves. How we're planning on doing it is a series of 9 workshops in both of those communities, which lead up towards 2 local energy action plans that symbolise and visualise the ambitions for those communities in a spatialised image of different actions that could happen in that area. But not only is it about plans, it's also about projects which are hands-on, that give the community that chance to take what started off as an idea and looking at the local area and what could be improved, and then turning it into something physical. Next slide.
The question of why we work in Oldham, apart from, of course, Oldham being a wonderful place, and I know Andrew is here from Oldham Council, who we love to work with. We were thinking around, so there are neighbourhoods, and we heard about that, and communities and also local authorities that take action and develop, for example, neighbourhood energy plans. And we knew we wanted to work in areas where there might be a need for a bit more initial support to get things going. So this project, in a way, in many ways, is an experiment. And equally, when working with communities, people offer their precious time, and expectations are raised. They should be raised. That's when we start to understand what good might mean. So failure is really not an option. And so we decided to work with the council in Oldham, because that can provide us with a little bit more of a safe space, safe conditions to do this pilot in. And that is for several reasons. You know, Oldham Council are completely committed to climate change action, actual action. So there are initiatives on the ground to link in with and to link citizen activity in with. The obviously the commitment to building green economy locally, also shown in their amazing Green New Deal document. If you haven't read it yet, maybe Laura can post a link. And they have a very well-established community infrastructure already. So the council works very closely with citizens. They have a local energy community which is connected to the council, and they practice community wealth building and actively collaborate with anchor institutions, which we will see is of course important for the legacy of pilot projects that we're developing through this going forward with anchor institutions and citizens. Next slide, please.
So to give you a bit of an insight into how we came up with this model in total, I'm going to break it down into a couple of questions and the answers that we've come up with them in our project team. So firstly, how can you make climate change into something that is relatable to everyday lives? Climate change can often feel like something that is so far off and distant, happening somewhere in the future, and it doesn't immediately make you spring to action. Whereas if you talk about the neighbourhood level, that is a space where action can really happen. So if we think about changes that need to happen for decarbonisation, these are changes that can happen in our homes. These are changes that need to happen to local transportation systems. And at the neighbourhood level, that's where local people are experts in what's working and what isn't working at that different scale at the moment. And therefore, it creates a really nice microcosm for those broader changes that need to happen in society, that allows people to be experts and own the kinds of discussions that can happen. So for us, the neighbourhood is a really essential part of putting people into the driving seat in coming up with low carbon plans. Next slide.
Yeah, and we decided to, at those 2 neighbourhood levels, work with a small recruited core group of 12 participants per neighbourhood to co-create the action plan. So we're bringing together a group that is as representative as possible of the local demographic, also considering, for example, tenure, local business representation, and with a particular emphasis on making sure we have at least 2 young people in the group and at least a gender balance and BAME representation. We're also bringing in someone from at least one of the anchor institutions who works at the resident engagement level. We're not bringing in councillors at this stage. I have experience with this kind of approach from work in neighbourhood planning and development, and I find it quite useful for several reasons. So feeling confident to speak one's mind if you're not used to that yet, being able to listen, hearing each other's viewpoints, negotiating needs and benefits. This all needs trust, and trust comes with time spent together. it's very simple. It tends to build the conditions to be creative, do collaborative solution finding, and actually starting to own the problem and the process together. So in the work that I do in my own neighborhood, for example, this is how people who would have never self-identified as that kind of person now sit on our board, making measured and intelligent decisions about large building contracts, etc. There will in this process be an opportunity for wider audiences in the community to participate and feedback, but this is the call. We're in the midst of the recruitment work for this for this process, which is probably the most sensitive and crucial time. We hired a local engagement person with a lot of expertise of the place and existing level of trust. It's a 3-month process of recruitment and of making connection, understanding existing structures and working with them. Next slide, please. So what have we considered? That the talent and creativity we need to create and maintain a vibrant place already exists locally. And creativity need to create and maintain a vibrant place already exists locally. It just needs the condition to grow and be nurtured. So we work in these workshops, we develop these workshops with Urbit, who are a long-term collaborator of ours. They're an urban design office who specializes in sustainable design and community-led planning. The workshops cover elements of energy systems education, data gathering from lived experience, data presentation from existing data sets, future visioning and energy modeling, and learning from what already existing local examples and other initiatives elsewhere know. And we go through 3 stages. One is diagnosis. So what's the current state? What do you experience? What do the numbers say? What impact is this having? What are existing initiatives? Then dreaming and developing. What could it be? What income? Oops.
Sorry.
No worries. I think it's the slide before that, but don't worry.
That's it. Thank you.
Oh, yes. So, so dreaming and developing. What could it be? What impact could this have? How do other people do it? And then defining what should our vision be? What are the actions that could bring us there and are really realistic in this context? I think really important, something that Kath pointed to. It's different for every context. And importantly, who can do what? Because of course, we need the regular links to main stakeholders. Not all changes can be driven or owned by the community, by no means. And then we travel through several different scales, starting from home, energy efficiency, heat and power, going into neighborhood collective homes, more transport, and then going into the borough renewables. And throughout this process, we have clear choke points and channels to relate to the wider community and to stakeholders. Then we produce the action plan, and with a set of actions and policy recommendations and a short list of pilot projects to take into the next phase of the project. Next slide, please.
Oh, I think it's supposed to be the data one next.
That one.
That's
Yes.
great, thanks. So to kind of support and guide that process throughout the workshop, we've been really keen to look at what is the available data that can help that process to go through it. So there's lots of research and visualizations and things produced by universities that are a fantastic resource, but not necessarily the easiest thing to bring together and make sense of. So we're developing a data dashboard that will aim to bring together key bits of information that can guide that process. So mapping out, even at the kind of basic level, where is the ward boundary or where is the neighbourhood boundary, and giving a visualization of that to start off a conversation about where are we talking about changing, looking at the existing energy infrastructure, and then key bits of information around ownership of land and buildings. So of course, that's going to be a really important part of thinking through how those different changes could happen in the local community. With this, we're also going to be providing some visualizations to talk about the impact of different options for that are explored in the local energy action plans in terms of greenhouse gases and from buildings and transport. And then finally, we're going to do our own modelling as well. So depending on what are the key conversations that come out of the workshops, we're going to look at what would be a future for those two neighbourhoods if we made such changes. So for example, if there is an interest in kind of electric vehicles or electric charging infrastructure, let's show what that looks like on a map and provide that as part of the workshop community, but always putting our people who are in our groups at the forefront of deciding what's the things that they really want to look at in a bit more detail. And throughout, we're going to be doing a comparison between what is said in the community workshops and what is said by the data that we can map, because we know that both can provide a really different view and expertise that can be brought together. So we're going to be providing a visualization at the end of what those two different kinds of expertise can offer towards developing a local energy action plan. Next slide.
I'm very aware of time, so I'm just going to go through.
Yes, please, if you could.
So we there are some avenues to tap into for our pilot projects locally already. This might be into existing plans for a local retrofit project, PV project, EV bikes, but it might also be that, of course, out of this co-production process comes something completely new that we don't know about yet, because that is what tends to happen when people start creating ideas. And next slide, please. In this process, we have a budget seed funding for those projects, which will actually be decided on in a participatory budget process. And we will then support those pilots in collaboration with LEADER and Carbon Co-op. And we have some other incentives for participants that have to do with their own, energy advice for themselves, services that Carbon Co-op can offer for people in their own homes. And finally, of course, we're trying to spend as much money as possible locally on venues, catering, translator, print, and so on. Next slide, please.
So once we have gone through this process, which is going to be launched this month and then is going to go for a year and a half afterwards, we're going to bring together our findings and put it together into a toolkit. CLES, the Centre for Local Economic Studies, is going to be working on this for us so that we're able to share what we find with others and kind of create a mix of different education resources, workshop advice, and different kind of ways of presenting data so that others can follow this. And we're going to be putting this out on our social media as we go too. So if you're wanting to get going with some of this, or maybe pinch some of the ideas as we're developing, and then please do follow Carbon Co-op Twitter. So, and that's just a summary of when we go, but I think we can skip to the end. So thanks so much. I hope that was useful, and willing to take questions at the end.
Thank you. We're getting a lot of appreciation and a lot of useful information being shared in the chat, but we don't actually have that many questions yet, so it's a good job because we're eating into our question and answer time. But last speaker for this session, after which there will be a short piece of time for questions and answer, and a couple of minutes break if we all just want to stand up and move around for a few minutes before we move into the second session. So thank you very much to Laura and Britt. And now I'd like to introduce Ollie from Community Energy South, who's going to tell us about their organisation and a project that they've got going on down in the southeast of England. So hi Ollie, are you there?
Hi, yeah, hello Helen, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Okay, that's good, yeah, my pleasure. And thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak in the Northwest and alongside such amazing groups and organisations. It's great to see you all out there doing stuff. But Helen, I talked to Helen about this project some time ago, and I'm really excited to share some of the outputs and our approach to Communiheat. It's a project that we've been working on for a number of years from a very engaged community since actually 2009. It's a rural community and that did a local plan people in the community were very strong about wanting to come off oil back in 2009 and find solutions to come off heating oil and decarbonize the community. And in 2012, we undertook a village energy plan, very detailed village energy plan, and which informed a lot of information. Actually, Centre for Sustainable Energy helped us with that. And then over the years, it's kind of been, we've been engaging with the community. It's very well engaged. And I met the team from Borough Happold on undertaking a regional energy strategy. And I explained to them this project about a very well engaged rural community wanting to come off oil. And together we went up to the Energy Networks Association, who are all of the energy networks in the UK. Sorry, if we just go back up to the first slide. And we presented this project with the concept is, look, we've got a very engaged rural community. If everybody comes off oil at the same time and goes on to renewable heating, what will happen to the electricity grid? And I asked the direct question, will we blow the grid? Because you don't need to tell the electricity network operator that you're going to come off oil. And everyone scratched their head and they said, well, that's a really interesting project. So we put together that project to try and inform, look at a roadmap for the whole community to come off oil. And Community describes that. And we're working in collaboration with UK Power Networks and obviously with Borough Happold, who are a very expert engineering company. Thank you. So Helen, if we just move on. So in all, the project is a year. There's a couple of big factors for us locally within our district. And one is that Lewes District Council, where we are, is committed to net zero. And at the moment, they are a Lib Dem, a mix of independent and green council. So they're in exactly the right position to really start pushing net zero and supporting projects like Community. So we've really got the sweet spot with the council, and that's really relevant. You know, they're really committed. And obviously the government is pushing the clean growth strategy and COVID recovery and everything. So this aligns with this, and with the view that the government announced in the clean growth strategy that they would take people off oil or start to transition home heating oil, and we still don't quite know what that looks like. So thank you. If we just move on to the next slide. So a little bit about the community. There's 580 homes. About 80% use oil for heating. We've got 23% use night storage heaters, and it's a typical rural community. You know, we've got about 6 different housing archetypes. And we have something called Sussex hung tile as well, believe it or not. Very beautiful to look at, but actually very badly insulated homes. And also the average energy usage is typical for rural communities. You know, it's much higher than average energy usage. 18 tons and a high private ownership in the village as well. So, and energy bills are much higher. So you know, it gives you an idea of the village and the fact that people are really keen. Now, at the moment, I should say that, you know, bringing this project to a rural community is very easy. There's no pushback. You know, people are all committed to net zero and climate change, but actually, how are people going to afford to come off oil and spend £15,000, £10,000 on an oil, you know, on an air source heat pump? So there is a real issue, but what we want to try and do through this project is really understand the behaviour change, but also the view of people over the next 10 years of when they would, if they could, transition. And then we've got an overall picture for this one rural community and what the impact on the grid is. And working with UK Power Networks, for them, will they have a planned approach or an unplanned approach to this transition? So if they need to upgrade the grid in a planned way, it will be much more cost efficient for them than if they do it in an unplanned way. And that's what we want to capture, that cost saving of the network infrastructure, and alongside the cost of all these homes coming off oil. So if 250 homes come off oil, it's about £4 million worth of air source heat pumps and retrofits, let's say. And alongside that, can the supply chain, can local installers actually deal with that level of uptake? So we're looking at the plan for the installers as well. Thank you, Helen. And then alongside this, we've got the community plan. So we're very lucky that Avesco is leading on this, and they're one of England's first community energy groups. They've been going now for nearly 15 years, so they're very embedded in the local community and have lots of projects and great examples. So, so it's not difficult to explain to the village to create their own energy. But how do we finance that really is a big point, and support them. So having the community energy model in place and a plan based on the 2012 plan will be really helpful for this first community to go to net zero. We see that. Thank you. So in the background, we've got these wonderful energy experts, Borough Happold, who, similar to Carbon Co-op and your work, they're using like a techno-economic model, and they're going to simulate the village. So we've employed energy champions in the village to go from house to house and do heat surveys and energy assessments of each home, and give each home a plan, but also retain the data, and then build the village, simulate the village, each home and the network, and then see how different scenarios will work over the next 10 years. So we're really, really lucky to have Borough Happold building a bespoke techno-economic and project, you know, a map of the village. Thank you. So I'm just going to put this out there now. You know, the payment mechanism, finding a way for all these houses to come off oil is not, you know, it's not there. The Green Homes Grant has been an absolute nightmare, and my inbox is full of people from my community. You know, one of them went to the police station with his complaint. He was so frustrated. It's been terribly badly managed. And, you know, how can we help these homes? And I only see that way of having a low interest loan facility. We've got people in every rural community who can afford to invest in a local bond, and then people in the village that need to draw from a local bond. So if we can blend those together and speak to our local authority about using, you know, low interest PWLB funding, or putting a bond down from the local authority, then we can create a payment mechanism. And please, anybody who knows of any solutions to this, please get in contact, because we need to find solutions for these rural communities. And the next slide, right, and this is just an example. So within the village, there's a church. It's got 16 homes around it. It's got a 60-year-old oil boiler, and it costs the church £8,000 in oil a year to heat for the weekend. Now the church is very engaged, and the Archbishop has said, yeah, you know, come on, let's green our churches. So we've got the church community in a really good place, and about 30% of this community are churchgoers or within the church group. And they're very keen, and they've actually got a field to the south of the church, which is south facing and well shielded. But around the church, there are 16 other homes on that particular energy network. So if we can all get them working together and connecting, so the church could own its solar farm to the south of the church, not on the graveyard, and then power the church, but then sell power to the neighbours so that they can use it during the week. So then we've got creating an electric church and a microgrid around that particular network that supplies 16 homes. And then the electricity network provider can upgrade in a planned way around that network. And one of the neighboring homes has just had to have a 3-phase supply for them to go to oil at the cost of 25,000. It's a big house. But, you know, all these individual homes are also having to pay for individual 3-phase upgrades. So if we can do it in a coordinated way, then there should be some real benefits. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully that's in time and gives you some time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen.
We've had a lot of inspiring presentations this morning, and there have been a lot of appreciation for them in the chat. I think most of the questions and answers have been dealt with as we've been going along. We are running slightly behind time, but only by about a few minutes, because I'm not sure that there is any questions coming through. I propose we have a 5-minute break now, so we can all just stand up and move around, and then we'll come back and we'll do the second session. Is that okay with everyone? If people could nod their heads and let me know, that would be great. Okay, so it is 1:15 now. We'll come back at 20 past promptly. Okay, so see you all in a few minutes. Go to the loo if you needed to. Right. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Philip Coventry from Community Energy England, who's going to talk about some of the support that's available for community energy groups. Right, over to you, Philip, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Helen, and yeah, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here and to see so many groups active, interested, and all sorts of other stakeholders, so that's brilliant. So yeah, today I'm just going to talk you through the support available for community energy groups. I'm going to kind of come at that from 3 angles. One is the support that we offer for Community Energy England. One is the kind of the national movement and the support that we offer to the sector as a whole. And then I'll just mention a few other little sources of support. So yeah, next slide, please, Helen. Thanks. So yeah, for those of you who don't know who we are, Community Energy England was set up several years ago to be the central voice of the community energy sector in England. We do have similar organisations in Wales and Scotland. We are the kind of representative body and the membership body for community energy. So we have over 270 members, lots of community energy organisations, but also other organisations, stakeholders like Electricity North West. Some of the people on the call today, so Carbon Co-op, Devon Energy, South Dartmoor Community Energy, Community Energy South, Big Solar Co-op. So they're all members of Community Energy England. And we also work with lots of different partners. Some of those are there on the slide. So we're the kind of the network that connects up all of the different distributed organisations who are all over the country, and we represent them nationally as well as locally. So next slide, please. Yeah. So the support that we offer that might help your organisation takes a variety of forms. I've put them up here, and the blue bits with the triangle, that's a short link, so you can just type that into your web browser. That would be a bit easier for you than the long web address if you want to copy it down. So to start with, we've got our how-to section. So that's something that we've developed on our website, which is to gather together loads of resources, because they're coming kind of produced by loads of organisations all over the place, engaging with the sector, all the stakeholders, people who are successfully doing community energy, local authorities, other organisations, you've heard many of them mentioned already today, and it is quite hard to kind of keep track of that and to find those if you're starting out. So we've done our best to collate them all together in our how-to section. So there's stuff there that will help you get started as an organisation, engage your community, develop a project, and other more advanced things in terms of new technological developments and things like that. One of the key services and things that we offer for our members, if you were to join us, is the online practitioners forum, which we call Lumio because it's on that platform. So that's a closed space that's just for community energy organisations. It allows them to connect, talk to other organisations who are having similar problems, trying to do similar projects. Starting out, you can talk to and ask advice from more experienced people who are in the sector and might have done what you've done before, made similar mistakes, or can help you avoid them. We also run lots of events through the year. So we encourage you to come to those. Sorry, that's a dog there. We encourage you to come along, mostly to meet other people in the sector. So one of our key roles is to connect people. As you're finding, you're in a region of the country, but there's organisations all over the country who have engaged with community energy, successfully completed projects, and we hear from those at our events, and we enable people to meet each other. Obviously, it's preferable in person, but we have been really successful with the online events. We also kind of promote within our networks share offers. If you're launching a share offer to fund your project, you can submit your events, so they're featured on our website, and our most popular page is the funding page, so we list all the funding opportunities that would be relevant to community energy that we can find there. So that's a great one to go to. Next slide, please, Helen. I'm talking as fast as I can. I hope it's not too fast. So the other thing I wanted to talk about really is that you're part of a movement. So community energy is a movement. It's a whole load of people all over the country and all over the world who think that people-led energy is important and is a way that we can change the way that our society and our lives function. So great examples in Europe, great examples in Australia. There's things happening everywhere, but obviously we have a focus on England, and what we do is try to advocate on behalf of the sector to help the sector grow. There's no sort of the big organisation within community energy, because that's the whole point of it. So what we do is try to gather our network together and speak on behalf of it. That takes many forms and involves those members and involves community energy organisations a lot, and other stakeholders like Electricity North West, for example, and Regen, kind of key partners of ours. So we advocate for government policy change at the national level. We work with local authorities wherever and whenever we can. We respond to consultations that affect the sector. So if some kind of regulator or policymaker is going to change something that might make it more difficult for community energy, or hopefully easier, we'll respond and try to represent the sector in there. We intervene if there are regulatory issues that might be affecting the sector. So we gather evidence from our members, from community energy organisations that can try and help get in and kind of change the mind or the view of somebody who's causing an obstacle for the sector. We work with network operators like Electricity North West, but also all of the others to help influence their plans. And we publish and research, we research and share data to reduce the burden of research on the sector. So the state of the sector that was mentioned earlier is really important for the detail that it gives. It's the most detailed research project into how community energy is doing in the country. And one of the reasons that we think that's important is for the evidence it gives and the way that it's picked up and used by policymakers and other organisations. Electricity North West use it significantly. So that is a way that it influences, but at the same time we hope to prevent quite as much research burden coming your way. So there are a lot of academics and other organisations that are trying to research the sector and try and help it, which is great, but that's quite a lot of burden for organisations like yours who may not have any employed staff, for example, and so participating in that research with positive intentions might be difficult for you. Next slide, Helen. I think I'm doing all right, 3 minutes left. So other sources of support. So we can't support everyone. We don't support individual groups. We're not an organisation that kind of will help you through the process of setting up a community energy organisation. We are this representative body that I've talked about. So there are many other places that you can go to find useful resources that will help you. The network operator is really important because they play such a pivotal role in the success of the community energy organisation in terms of the connection, and in the sense of some, like Electricity North West, they actually provide funding and a dedicated resource in the form of Helen to help. So I know that some of you may be from outside Helen's the Electricity North West region, so I would urge you to kind of find out what your local network operator is and engage with them as early as possible in the process. Organisations like Cooperatives UK, Locality and My Community, they're designed to help community organisations and community engagement and forming of an organisation. So they will be really helpful for you if you're sort of an unregistered group and you're trying to work out how to become a formal organisation. That's quite an important step in the process. Your local authorities, it's been really encouraging for me to see in the chat some local authorities who are offering support and want to get engaged in community energy, and we support that 100% because we think the local authorities are such important partners, and the work that can be done by community energy is only improved by cooperating really fully with the community, with a local authority. And it's really great when the enthusiasm comes from both directions. So try to find resources. It's not easy sometimes trying to find out how to get engaged with your local authority, but we do urge you to try and find a way in. So especially if you happen to be lucky enough to live in one of the places where people have put in the chat messages their contact details, that's brilliant. So do reach out and see how you can kind of cooperate with your local authority and how they can help you. Powerpad is something I'd also urge you to look at, both if you are a community energy organisation, but also somebody like a local authority, or you're a business owner, for example. It's a matching platform, so it's been created to list sites where a community energy project could happen. Or if you've got a willing landlord, for example, or a landowner, there's lots of sites like that on there. And then if you're a community energy organisation, you can register, and it basically sort of say where you are and what you're looking for, and it will try and match you up. So we've had many successful matches so far, and we hope that it will lead to successful projects. But one of the challenges can be finding a site within your community area on which you can do some community energy, especially from the generation side. So that's a great place to go, and a resource which we hope will build and develop. Your local energy hubs, so it's Kate who's from the one in the Northwest region, but again, they're all over the country, so do contact them. They've got good resources, good knowledge, and they help with the Rural Community Energy Fund in terms of a key piece of funding for the sector. And lastly, the Next Generation project is just something good to look at because they're a big innovative project within the sector, kind of working with lots of community energy organisations, trying to help them develop newer innovative projects, and that might be quite good for inspiration and new ideas, as well as how to get started, which they can also kind of offer resources for. Lastly, one last thing, I know I'm up to 10 minutes, but lastly, please join us if you're starting out. It's not difficult, it's a short form, we don't charge for membership fees when you're just starting out. And it'll give you access to our newsletter and to the Lumio platform where you can really connect. It's quite lively. There's a lot of discussion there, and it's a great place to get resource. So follow that link and submit the form, and we hope that you'll become a member soon. And good luck on your journey.
Thank you very much, Philip. That was great. And thank you for sticking to time. That should mean we have time for questions and answers at the end. So please feel free to post any in the chat if you'd like to ask any of the speakers. Ollie's dropped off, but the rest of the speakers are still here. But next, I'd like to introduce Kate, who Philip's just referred to, who works at the local energy hub and delivering the Rural Community Energy Fund. So over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Helen. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm Kate Gill-Martin, and I'm delivering the Rural Community Energy Fund across the Northwest. And I'm going to be talking about how that grant funding can support project development. So next slide, please, Helen. So why community energy? I think we've talked quite a lot over this morning about net zero and decarbonisation. And I think it's really key to understand that the next 10 to 15 years, putting those frameworks in place to decarbonise has to happen in the next 10 to 15 years, because those frameworks will then drive the rest of the emissions to 2050, which are going to be very difficult. But we know what to do, but it's how, what's the how of the delivery and implementation. And the Climate Change Committee, there's a quote here from them which says, over half the required emissions cuts rely on purchasing or behaviour decisions made by individuals, businesses and organisations. So it just shows you that community level action is absolutely key for the UK to meet the net zero target. And the grant fund, the Rural Community Energy Grant Fund, is enabling communities to take on the challenge of decarbonisation and leveraging community investment and delivering key projects within those communities. And I've just put a link there to the My 2050 calculator. So it's quite a handy tool from Bayes to show the net zero pathways, which just highlight how hard it is and how it's going to reach absolutely every one of us. Next slide, please, Helen. So the fund that I'm delivering, it's from central government, from Bayes, and it's delivered via the energy hubs that are regional across England. And I'm part of the Northwest Energy Hub. We've got £1 million, of which we've allocated nearly half of that. And that fund is awarded in 2 stages. Stage 1, which is for feasibility grants, up to £40,000, and stage 2 for development grants for up to £100,000. And it's an application process, and the board at the Energy Hub review those applications and decide which projects get funding. I'm here to help resource that fund and give you time to, and my expertise in renewable energy. I've been a renewable energy consultant for 10 years, so please do use me and my resource. Next slide, please, Helen. So what is community energy? I think we've talked about this quite a lot this morning. I mean, my definition is an activity community energy is an activity by a community of people joining together to find and enable solutions for carbon reduction within their community. And I think we've mentioned that often communities will use a vehicle for that development, which is a community benefit society. And they are very uniquely allowed by the Financial Conduct Authority to raise investment via share issue. So they can raise the capital for a project by doing a share issue. And I think Phil's already put a link in about his project, and I'll mention that shortly as well, how they've just raised all their money. But the Community Benefit Society, it's very democratic, it's not for profit. You own some shares, you have one vote, it doesn't matter how many shares you own. And all the profit goes into a community benefit fund, and that fund is then used for allocation for community projects and works within that community. Next slide, please, Helen. So why is community energy so important? We've got mass mobilisation. I think we've already said, you know, everybody is going to be affected by net zero. And I think community energy, it's based on, its whole ethos is collaboration and cooperation. And, you know, we need all hands on deck to meet the climate change challenge. And there's no one big solution, no matter how many times people tell you hydrogen is going to do it for us. It's multiple small solutions, of which community energy is a really big part. It's all the unsexy stuff that Jodie was saying about draft proofing, and it's all the door knocking and that collaboration between communities. And obviously Philip just mentioned Community Energy England. Community energy is a national network. You know, it's been around for about 15 years. It's a growing movement, and it's a lovely space to work in because people do want to share and they do want to collaborate, and we all have the common goal to decarbonise and mitigate towards climate change. Next slide, please, Helen. So the community energy model, I always kind of state that it's not commercial development undertaken by hobbyists and volunteers, and it's not in direct competition with commercial developers. It's got a really different starting point, a very different angle of approach. We've mentioned the financial model, which is raising share issue money for the capex of projects, and it has a very individual, unique selling point, which is the motivation, the drive that communities have. It's a green motivation, it's a local motivation. Community energy groups have so much tenacity and resilience. They have the finance, they want to lever in community investment into projects, and community engagement. They are so uniquely placed to engage the rest of their communities, which certainly commercial developers can't do. Next slide, please, Helen. So the Rural Community Energy Fund, kind of this project process, basically we want you to come to me if you have a project idea or just an aspiration to create a project, and get in touch with me. I can tell you whether it's defined as rural. It comes under the definition of DEFRA Magic Map, usually areas of population of less than 10,000 people. And I can quickly look that up on a map and let you know whether you're in a rural area or not. And then I can support you to scope a project. So the projects have to have enough energy demand or energy generation for multiple buildings. So unfortunately, we can't look at a single village hall, for example, but I can help you look beyond within the whole community. What else can we look at within that, past the village hall? One of my first calls will be to Helen and say, tell me about the grid capacity. And it's great to have Helen there, she's very supportive. And then I work with the group to try and build up an expression of interest. So we'll try and define a project which I think will be likely to get funding for feasibility funding. And the applicant has to be either a charity, a parish council, community interest company, community benefit society, or a cooperative. But again, if you're not already in a defined entity like that, then still work with me, because we'll probably be able to find a group that you can co-work with. And then we'd put together an application for the feasibility and help you with the scope of work for that feasibility, which would need to get 3 quotes from consultants. But again, I can really support you with that. And then throughout the project, we'll carry on reviewing the work. We'll have stop gaps, make sure there aren't any showstoppers that mean the project's not going to be feasible. So it's a very collaborative process. And the idea being that if it's a feasible project, then it will go straight over to an application for development grant, which looks for, which can fund things like planning, environmental impact assessments, ecology studies, design work. And hopefully by the end of that development grant, the project should be in a position where it's investment ready, where the community can go ahead and look at a share issue. Next slide, please, Helen. So a few projects that we've got coming through RCEF. We've got Solar Meadow in Accrington. This is a large-scale ground-mounted solar array that's just finished its feasibility, and they're applying for the development grant. Key to this project, we've talked about subsidies going. Key is selling the electricity directly to a high-energy consumer, and we're working with a factory down the road who hopefully will take 60% of the electricity generated. So that's been a key part of the project. Next slide, please, Helen. Bretton Hall Farm, I really wanted to mention this one because of its scale. It's actually 30 megawatts, a ground-mounted project, really big, one of the biggest community energy projects in the UK, and it shows the development of community energy. The team behind this project have got years of community energy experience and loads of projects tucked under their belt, but this is community energy where we want to aspire to be. Next slide, please, Helen. Lim Community Energy, here's a great community energy group that have already got solar on their primary schools, and they decided they want to try and get solar for their high school. So they found a ground-mounted potential project which is undergoing feasibility at the moment, and hopefully they will go on to get the development grant as well, and it will be a substantial project for their community. Next slide, please, Helen. Bessemer Hydro, this is a small hydro in Cumbria, and key to this project, without the feed-in tariff, it's really hard to get hydro projects to stack up because they have a very high capital cost, although they do generate for years and years and years, but it's finding that capital cost at the outset. But here, the community group have liaised with the local hotel, who have agreed that they're likely to buy the electricity from the hydro, and we're also going to be co-locating 2 electric vehicle charging points as well. And as Bessemer is a big tourist attraction, would hopefully have those electric vehicle charging points working for many hours using that hydroelectricity. Next slide, please, Helen. Conkelton Hydro, now they actually did a credit for the feed-in tariff, and they've also got a private wire, so their business case stacks up and they can meet that very expensive preliminary capital cost for hydro, especially low head hydro. And here's the Archimedes screw arriving, and that was the Archimedes screw going into site about 6 weeks ago, so they're on track to be generating later this year. Next slide, please, Helen. We've already talked from Ollie about getting people off oil, and we're really happy to be working with Chipping. They're an off-gas grid community, mostly on oil, about 180 houses, and we're about to start feasibility work looking at a communal heat scheme and also individual air source heat pumps. So I'll be very excited to share this learning once we get underway with the feasibility. Next slide, Helen. Thank you. And this is another low carbon heat project, but here it is actually new build, so affordable homes which have just been given planning permission in Kirkby Stephen, and it's actually on gas here. So here the key is, how do we make, how do we get people not to put gas boilers in? I mean, we're not allowed to after 2025 anyway, but we're looking at the costs for communal ground source heat or individual air source heat pumps. And the key here will be to talk to the rest of the community about whether we can have a ripple effect from this. Can we, if we do have a communal heat scheme, can that be rolled out in waves to the rest of the village and get them off gas? And it's going to be very hard because gas is so cheap. Next slide, please, Helen. Burneside, I think Phil's already put in the chat, they have raised their total amount for their third phase of solar on the roof there at Burneside Mill in just 12 days. So fantastic news, Phil. Congratulations. Next slide, please, Helen. So just to wrap up, community energy, the benefits of community energy, for me, it has to be the engagement. We have to have peer-to-peer information giving, not only across groups, so we're not reinventing the wheel, but also peer-to-peer within a community. Community energy groups can give motivation and insurance for things like group buying that Molly was talking about at Ambleside. Community energy normalises these changes in ideas and behaviour around energy that we have to get through if we are going to decarbonise. And this community energy, this collectivism, brings its own momentum. And if we try to look at other third parties who could do this, we're not going to be able to get people to do this. It's the boots on the ground, it's the door knocking, it's the engagement, and it's a key interface between local authorities and distribution network operators and energy suppliers. We know we need to have community groups on the ground talking to their communities. Next slide, please, Helen. And in conclusion, I think community energy empowers people to engage in low carbon action. I think we've already mentioned it's a very emotive topic, climate change, and people react very differently to it. Sometimes I don't really talk about climate change, I just talk about decarbonisation. But it's a great way, by engaging people around a project, it kind of coalesces people and gives them something exciting and momentum to move things forward. It also delivers local assets, democratisation of energy, and the community benefit fund that goes with that. Disruptive business models. Communities who've got their own renewable energy assets, they want to buy that energy directly. So we've got things like support for the local electricity bill. And it's people voluntarily coming together to achieve a common objective for the common good. And there's so much additional value, which is really hard to capture, although Community Energy England do a really good job of trying to capture the social impact, the fuel poverty alleviation, and those trusted messengers within a community and how that message ripples out. And also, without mobilisation of community action, we're not going to meet our decarbonisation targets. Community action is absolutely key to do that. Thank you, and I think we're having questions at the end, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. There are a couple of questions coming through in the chat, so there's one for you we can deal with at the end, and there's a couple that I will get to as well. So thank you very much for that. It's great to see all those projects. I'm just going to spend a few minutes now just to introduce in Electricity North West in a bit more detail. I know some of you know us very well, but I think there's probably some people on the call that might not. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time to say who we are and why it is that we're supporting community energy groups. So I thought it was first worth just introducing who we are properly. So we're the Distribution Network Operator, or DNO, for the northwest of England. That means we operate the cables and substations and those associated assets that distribute electricity from the high voltage network, which is operated by National Grid, to your homes and businesses. We don't generate electricity, and we're not a supply company, which means that we don't bill customers directly. Our costs are included as part of your electricity bill, but you pay your suppliers and then they settle up with us. And we like to think, or we like to say, one of our straplines is that we're a vital service that keeps customers' lives running. We used to just say that we keep customers' lights on because electricity used to play a relatively straightforward role in people's lives. And at the same time, as you can see from the diagram on the left, we operated a fairly straightforward network with large generators, and we moved the power down to homes and businesses in one direction. But as we've all started to take action on climate change, and we've heard about some amazing action that's taking place today, it's led to the increased installations of renewable energy such as solar panels, wind farms, and low carbon sources of heat such as heat pumps and chargers needed for electric vehicles. So more and more connections are needed to be made onto our network, onto the distributed low voltage part of the network. And that means there's more and more demand for connections. So as you can see from the diagram on the right, our network is starting to become more like a system, and we need to operate it as such. And as a result of that, and at the same time, customers' lives are becoming more and more reliant on electricity as it keeps our appliances running, internet, heating systems, cars. You imagine working from home when there's a power cut. It's challenging. So that means that as a company, we have an even greater need to talk to our customers and stakeholders to understand what you're doing, to get involved with your projects and to support your aspirations. And that's what I've been doing since I started in this role in October, is talking to community and local energy groups. And from what I've heard to date is that they really appreciate our support in 3 areas. Access to us as a company, so early engagement on projects to make sure that we're available, and to make sure we're available to talk to people at the right time. The second area for support is finance, helping make projects financially viable, especially as it relates to the cost of the grid connection. And the third area is around support for regulation and understanding how this industry works and what impact various different rules and policies have on projects and how they operate. So what we've done to date is we've clearly set out a strategy and an action plan so stakeholders can see what we're doing and why we and can easily provide feedback and comment on how we're delivering that. We're always up for ideas for things that we should be doing and new ways to work. A lot of what we do is focused on talking to community energy groups. So we've delivered events and newsletters. We have lots of information on our website for people just starting out and for those developing their projects and those that are ready to apply for a grid connection. So if you haven't already had a look, please have a look around that. And we've also awarded 13 grants to community energy projects, a couple of which have already been mentioned this morning. Our fund is called the Powering Our Communities Fund, and it aims to support projects that are just starting off to get off the ground and those projects that want to take the next step. Here are the projects that we funded in the first couple of years, and the new winners have just been announced on our website. And as you can see, there's a wide variety of different activity. And if you think this grant fund might help your plans in the future, then have a look at the case studies on our website, and then we'll be releasing details of this year's fund later in the year. And if you sign up to our newsletter, you'll be in the first group of people to find out about it when it gets launched. And I would just recommend signing up to our newsletter to keep up to date with all the activities that we're doing. And I share news from across the sector when people send it to me to share. So in summary, we're here to help you with your project, especially if it requires a grid connection. And my advice is the same as Philip's. It's never too early to engage us or come and talk to us. My colleagues with expertise in our network can talk to you about the most likely point of connection, and we can estimate costs at an early stage. We also provide the advice and guidance and case studies and on our website and through events and newsletters. And hopefully this is a source of information as well as inspiration. And these engagement events are also for you to use as a resource. We like to hear from you and get your feedback during these events, but in return, we want to help these events to be a resource, and we want your help to shape the topics. So in a minute, we're going to launch another poll to find out what topics you'd like to see for our next year's programme of events, because we haven't decided what to do yet. So it's all open for you to influence what it is we're going to deliver. We deliver 4 events a year. And like I said, it's a resource for the sector and also a way for us to engage so we can keep in touch and find out what you're all up to. So keep in touch, get in touch if you've got a project, keep up to date by signing up to our newsletter. There are my contact details. We'll circulate the slides and a link to the recording to everybody who signed up to the event after early next week. And that's it from me. Did that nice and quickly, so hopefully we've got 10 minutes left for questions and answers. You can ask them to any of the speakers. I think we'll try and Kate, if you can maybe help me try and pick some out from the chat function. And then we've also got another poll which Hilary will put into the chat. So if we could be doing that whilst we're doing questions and answers. And I think you can raise your hand to ask a question in real life, but as you can tell from today, I'm a bit confused about how this operates. Kate, did you have anything to say about the question about the RCEF?
Sorry, was there a question about RCEF? I didn't see that one. I've just seen a question from Nick about the SPEN network, which is Cheshire West and Chester. And do they have a similar network to this? To be honest, I'm not sure, Nick. Helen's got, I don't think they've got a community energy manager, that's for sure. And obviously Helen's very much behind this network. But yeah, drop me an email and I'll see if I can find your contact there.
There is a question about what support we give to communities wanting an EV charging point. Come and talk to us and we can help you through our grid connection process. And it can also introduce you to a community energy group called Charge My Street, who may or may not be on the call, who help communities install community energy charge points.
Yeah, and they've, I should mention, I think, I don't know whether John's on still from Mellor Parish Council, but they've just had electric charging points put in at the village hall there through Charge My Street. They have got grant funding for that. So yeah, again, I can pop you in touch with anybody from there. Kate Rawls, do you want to ask your question, Kate? Do you want to unmute, or do you want me to ask it? Okay. No. Well, Kate was asking about.
Sorry, I can ask the question.
Oh.
I'm part of a small South Cumbrian co-housing group, and I'm really looking for information and support about how to develop a sort of comprehensive net zero process for a new build project. We've just got planning permission to build 5 new houses, and we want to do that in a net zero way. And yeah, as I say, really looking for how would you develop a comprehensive net zero process for that.
I'm just wondering whether I don't know whether Molly or Ro are still on from CAFs, but would you be able to pick that up, Molly?
I was just going to ask, is this with Diane Hubbard?
Yes.
It's the same project. I've spoken to Diane, and I wouldn't know more than Diane knows already. She's already, you know her, she's already got a high level of expertise. Phil and I will hopefully possibly be working with some housing associations looking at this, but it's not something that we're doing quite yet. So perhaps we could just stay in touch about it. We might be able to offer you some support.
Great, thank you very much.
Great, thanks for that question, Kate. I'm just thinking, are there any other? Oh yeah, John's just said Charge My Street are a great resource, so a thumbs up from John. And Phil's just saying that he's working with Charge My Street as well. So yeah, any EV charging points, then do get in touch and we can put you in touch with AD at Charge My Street.
I think I saw a question in the chat about grid connections being delayed because of parts being required from China. I have absolutely no experience or knowledge of that, but I think it's Timothy that asked the question. I'll find out for you and let you know. We're normally quite well stocked for our projects, and we definitely, all companies made preparations for Brexit. So I'm not sure, but I don't know. I'll find out for you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, we had a meeting last week, and it was read on the risk register from our consultant. So I'd be really grateful for an answer if that's possible. But it sounds like from what you're saying, I hope there isn't a problem.
I'll find out and let you know.
Thanks.
I'm just thinking there was another. Oh, hold on, where's that gone now? Oh yeah, Britt asked about Urban Community Energy Fund. Yeah, sorry, Britt. We have been told that we might get more funding in, and it might not be specifically for rural areas, but there's lots of mights. So there's no kind of definite funding along the way. The Community Renewal Fund it's less about renewable energy, but it's very focused on decarbonisation, and that will be urban as well. So I can pick up with you about that if you want, Britt.
Just a reminder to fill in the poll if you haven't. The links are in the chat. There's a couple of questions in there about how you've found today and what you'd like to see future topics discussed at events.
I think it's probably worth mentioning, Helen, as well, that you know, between us all here, I think there's lots of knowledge, lots of support out out here. So please do get in touch, because if Helen and I can't specifically help you, we may well know someone who can. And yeah, so please do use our resource.
Yeah, and we've got about 3 minutes left of the formal agenda. So I just wanted to say thank you before you all start dropping off for coming on today. And if you do want to stay on, we're going to keep the Zoom call open for up to half an hour, either in the main room, or if there's enough of us, we'll break out into smaller groups. So if you do fancy a chat, yeah, feel free to stay on. But we've just got a couple more minutes if anyone hasn't finished done the poll. And if there's any more questions, feel free to speak up if you've got a question. You don't have to type it into the chat. Okay. Right. Hilary, do you have any poll results to share with us, or are people still completing it?
They're still completing it, but I can share them if you would like me to. That's
Yeah,
fine.
especially the ones about future subjects, just in case there's any comments on those before we move on.
Yeah, okay.
Before we finish.
I think Richard's got a question as well. Richard, do you want to unmute and ask your question while we're looking at the poll?
Yes, hello, thank you. Been an extremely informative webinar, thank you. Yeah, we have a small community group here on some terraced houses in the middle of Halifax. It's a little bit comatose, but stumbling along. We just communicate by email, but we do have a formal constitution as required by the council. We've had funds from them in the past as a result. I'm just wondering if there'll be any problem with moving on towards doing some of the things you suggest in constitutional terms.
So what constitution are you then, Richard? Did you say, sorry?
Community group.
Okay, and you've constituted. I mean, yeah, I mean, certainly with Rural Community Energy Fund, I tend to work with people that aren't even constituted into a formal group, and we usually work with them to kind of scope a project and seed a project, and the parish council can apply for funding on the behalf of unconstituted groups as well. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter what group you are until you wanted to raise any money via a share issue. And to do that, you have to be a community benefit society, because that's the only vehicle that will allow you to raise that funding via a share issue. But drop me an email if you want, Richard, if you want some more information. I'm happy to pick this up with you.
Right, thank you very much. Right, I think that brings us to an end for today. If you want to hang around in about a minute or so, we'll see who's left. We can put people into groups, or we can just stay and chat on here, or if you've all had enough for sitting down for 2 hours, I'll see you. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your feedback, and we'll see you next time. But that's an end to the formal part of today's workshop. So thank you very much, everybody. So for those of you that want to stay on, want to unmute.